A good Tavach. All right. We're going to give a little tzedakah first, as is our custom. We like to use the Kala Chabad Pushka app because it's fun and it's a good cause. Remember, we're learning in order to prepare a birthday gift for the Rebbe's birthday Yud Alf Nissen, and we also give tzedakah. It's also part of the gift. There you go. Awesome. Okay. Fine. Let me silence the phone. Great. Won't hear anything over here. Yeah, silence. All right. We have a very interesting letter tonight. I want to thank Zalman Bendit, who's a member of our 30 Letters in 30 Days team, who found this letter, not just the letter, but found the background. Because it's, very... anytime you read a letter, the letter itself is enjoyable, but then when you have background to fill it in, it's like a whole other level of geschmack. And this happens to be one of those cases where you have the background. And I actually have archival materials to share with you. Fun. Okay, so little background. The background is, well, you know what? I'm not going to give background. I'm going to start reading the letter, and as it comes up, I'm going to mention the background. Okay, Baruch Hashem, Yud Gimel Tisha, Tavshin Yud Daled. This is a letter from Igros Chelig Ches, in the 8th volume, letter 2249. The date is Yud Gimel Tishrei, Tavshin Yud Daled, which, by the way, Yud Gimel Tishrei is the Rebbe Maharash's yahrzeit. Brooklyn, New York. And here are the titles: Hanichbed v'hanayla ish hamayla, Aska Nimrutz, Maskil al Davar Toy v'chulu, Dr. Yud Nun, which is Yitzchok Nachman Steinberg Shichya. Okay, who is this person who gets all these titles? This Dr. Steinberg, Yitzchok Nachman, or Isaac Steinberg. A very interesting, colorful character, and I would call him a character. He was originally from Dvinsk, which I think now is Latvia. I know Dvinsk because that's where the Rogatchover was from. He was a Soviet-era politician. He was involved in Soviet politics under Lenin, but here's the really weird thing. He was a Frommer Yid. He kept Shabbos. That's extremely unusual. Yes, unfortunately, there were Jews who were aligned with the communists, but those were the irreligious and anti-religious. This was a very unusual type of thing. Anyways, he left the Soviet Union. Then he was, where did he go? I think he was in Germany. And then in the 30s, when the Nazis came to power, then he moved to England. He started this movement called the Freelanders. I think that's what it was called. The Freeland League. And they were looking to create a Jewish state of some type, but not in Eretz Yisrael. They were looking at random places like Suriname. Then they had a prospect in Australia, and then there's a letter actually from the Premier of Australia to him saying that no, they're not going to do it. And then eventually he moved to New York. Well, then he was in Canada, I think. Anyways, he ended up in New York. That's where he was when this story happened in the 1950s. And he passed away in New York in 1957. So that's 3 years after this letter. Okay. And what's really interesting is even after 1948, he persisted in this plan to set up a Jewish state some random place, not in Eretz Yisrael. And he kept up with it, even after 1948. And he was a Yiddishist, meaning he was into I would call it linguistic nationalism of Yiddish. And that's, by the way, what the letter is about. And, there are people who have certain things that they're passionate about, like one-track mind, and that any opportunity they have to speak about that thing, it's that's their excuse to go into their stump speech. I'm making up a lot about somebody right now, but that's when I saw this, that's what I thought, and you're going to see what I mean, and you'll decide if you agree or disagree. But basically, here's a guy who's very into a certain idea of Jewish identity, and he got triggered, and he actually let's. I don't want to give away the whole story because the letter itself takes us through the story. Okay. All right. Shalom avracha, greetings and blessings. Mehameskiros masruli, the secretariat conveyed to me. Toichen sichase, the content of your conversation. Ha telephonus, on the telephone. He called Maskiros. Okay, guy picked up a phone and called. What is it? Hyacinth, whatever. By the way, every chassid should know that phone number because it's on the Rebbe stationery. Hyacinth, whatever. You know what? Hold on a second. I probably have it here because I'm going to pull up. Yeah, okay. Right here. I'm pulling it up. Because this is about to come. Hyacinth 39250. People who are really old know. I mean, this is before my time, but at least like I knew people who are still alive when I was a kid who used to use the alphabet exchanges. You know that on a phone number? Kids, do you know on a phone number that like every number corresponds to certain letters? Like gematria, kind of. But they used to use exchanges. I think this is even before like area codes. Could be. They would use local exchanges. This is definitely when Brooklyn was a 212. There's no question. This was before 718 existed. Anyways, Hyacinth was like the exchange for Crown Heights or for that part of Crown Heights. Anyways, so this guy picks up the phone and he called Maskiris. Why did he call Maskiris? So you're looking at this right. I'm sharing this image with you. Okay. This is a letter that he got. And you see it's on the Rebbe stationery. By the grace of God, Erev Rosh Hashanah 5714, meaning it was like a Rosh Hashanah greeting, okay? Now, when is this letter? Yud Gimel Tishrei. So this is like a couple weeks later. Dr. Steinberg, care of Freeland League. Oh, that's what I was referring to, Freeland League. Okay. 1819 Broadway, New York, New York. So he's in Manhattan, greeting and blessing. On the threshold of the new year. It's basically a New Year's card. May it bring blessings to us all. I send you my prayerful wishes for a good and pleasant year materially and spiritually. I take this opportunity to thank you for your thoughtfulness in sending your books from my library with the traditional blessing of Ksiv V'Chsima Tova, cordially, the Rebbe's holy signature in English. Okay, so apparently this guy sent some books to the Rebbe. By the way, the Rebbe was always expanding the library. Anyone who knows the whole history of the library and the story of Hey Tavis, you know that this was something that the Rebbe's Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was Meiser Nefesh for the library of Lubavitch, and the Rebbe continued that. So, yes, the Rebbe would have been very, very appreciative if someone sent in books for the library, and it didn't necessarily have to be books that the Rebbe himself wanted to study. There was this concept of Lubavitch having just a real academic library where, I mean, they have all types of books in the Rebbe's library. It not necessarily doesn't mean something that the Rebbe wanted to learn or wanted to incorporate into the sichas. There was a concept of just expanding the library, having a large library. So the Rebbe sent basically a Lashana Tova card and a thank you card to this guy. I don't know if they had any dealings before that. Okay. The guy gets this letter, and he's triggered. I'm making this up, but this is what it really seems to me. And he's triggered. He looks at this thing, and he's like, "Are you talking? How is this possible?" Okay, well, you're going to see what triggered him. All right, let's go back to the letter. So the Maskiris, the secretariat, conveyed to me your telephone conversation with them. Ubefrat asher kora tagur al ma shemishtamshim etzleinu b'sfas hamedina. Specifically this, that you were like, you complained, like you called me out for using the local language, meaning English. That you are concerned that there is a very, like, there's a possibility here for assimilation, that this could lead to assimilation. I shouldn't laugh, but it's funny to me. It's funny to me. I'm just imagining the emails that I get from random people that I have never met. who have random comments. And I'm just thinking how I would take it if, like, someone who works for me comes over and says, by the way, this random guy calls and he's like upset that you send him a card in English because he says you're leading to assimilation. like personally, I'm like, really, like, to say I would be, I don't know if the word is annoyed, but like, I'm just being very, very transparent with you. I would have a hard time taking that seriously, especially if you're the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Like, oh, I'm promoting assimilation, right? I'm promoting assimilation over here, right? Like, it's so far off the mark, and it's so, to me, so clearly just his obsession that he wants to think that, because he's a linguistic nationalist. So for him, Jewish identity is language. Yiddish specifically, was a Yiddishist. So he sees something in English, bing, 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 bing. He's like super triggered. He's calling my Skiddish. Lubavitcher Rebbe is sending out English. He's leading to assimilation. Like, personally, I would just so ignore that, or if I was forced to ignore if I was forced to engage with it, it would probably be in some type of passive aggressive way. Am I being too transparent? I don't know. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm telling you the truth, not so that you know that I'm a flawed human being, because I think everybody knows that. I'm telling you this because it for me, makes it so amazing how the Rebbe responds. Obviously, the Rebbe responds respectfully, but how the Rebbe is able to take, essentially, which is like an obnoxious comment. I'm sorry to say that, but to me, that's what it is. And to turn it into an opportunity to connect and to educate. The Rebbe doesn't give in. The Rebbe stands his ground. So there's that strength of opinion, but at the same time, it's like respectful, it's warm, the Rebbe encourages him, the Rebbe demands from him. Like, and to me, in my little Shais Taub brain, to me, that's what an neshama klolos is. That, neshama klolos is the concept of an aggregate soul, a soul that's connected, a Rebbe, Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people, like a body has a head that connects to all the different limbs and organs and parts, that basically a Rebbe has to have a relationship with every single Yid. And so if someone's reaching out, even if it's like reaching out in what I would consider a very unpleasant and weird way, okay, fine, but that's not the main thing. The Rebbe is a shepherd. And this is one of his sheep. And there's an opportunity for interaction. So to me, it just blows me away, because this is the kind of comment that I would just totally not appreciate getting. Like someone who's so off the mark, just mischaracterizing me because he's obsessed with a certain single-minded issue that he has about Yiddish, and instead of ignoring it or blasting the guy for his rude comment, the Rebbe turns it into a connection. I mean, to me, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay. Let's keep going. All right. V'hine noyim li lishmaya hashkafase hacharifa b'inyanei assimilatzia. First of all, the Rebbe, I love how the Rebbe, agrees with the guy, to the point where the Rebbe can agree. The Rebbe's not going to agree that he shouldn't have sent the letter in English, okay? But the Rebbe agrees with him where he can agree. He finds the common ground. He's like, by the way, I love that you have a sharp, harifa means sharp. I love that you have a sharp hashkafa, a very strong, I love that you're passionate about fighting assimilation. Totally cool. I love it. If that's something that in all times it's necessary to be careful about. How much more so in our days, where boundaries are being blurred. Wow. How much more so in 2025? We live in a day and age where boundaries are being blurred. Especially, you have today people who don't just blur the boundaries; they blur them to the point of completely flipping everything, and they call darkness light, and they call light darkness. So you're right, totally. We have to be so careful about assimilation now when so many things are blurred and there's so much confusion. I hope that you have a good eye on others. Having a good eye on others doesn't mean here, I don't think, looking at people favorably. It means looking at people generously, meaning being willing to give of your own. That's why I think it, because it continues and says, regarding this hashkafa and your influence on others. In other words, it's so interesting that I was saying, I'm glad that you are passionate about standing up against assimilation, and I'm sure that you generously share that hashkafa with others. That if you can influence people to also be passionate about that cause, that you do that. And it's interesting because that's kind of what the guy's doing right now. He's passionately sharing that hashkafa. But, first of all, it could be just, when somebody engages him or when he has an opportunity for critique, he talks about it. But the Rebbe is encouraging him, speak to everyone about it. Speak to the people who are actually assimilating. Also, could be something he's already doing, and that I was just giving encouragement, and really it's a bracha as well. When the Rebbe encourages a behavior, it's also giving koiches for the person, or revealing koiches for the person to engage in that behavior. All right, okay, but now let's get down to actuality. Masha maitzim anu la'oir inyanid dfus v'chadema loy rak b'lahak v'Yiddish. This, that we publish stuff not just in the Holy Tongue or Yiddish. That our office puts out stuff in other languages. Elegamkin ba'anglit, we use English, and I love in the parentheses vegam tzarfosis, also in French. So that I was saying, like, you think I'm only writing in English? I'll tell you even more. I'm also writing in French. You thought it was just one Goyish language. It's also, we got another one we also are using over here. Okay. So why is our office dealing with these non-Jewish languages? Hine, Yedua Masha Amr Chazal, so we know what our sages say, that the main thing is not study but deed. Okay, let's get down to practicality. And when it comes to actual deed, we cannot wait until all of our brothers, all of the Jewish people in every place, learn the Holy Tongue or Yiddish. Because we need to save them and bring them close to our Father in heaven and to His Torah and mitzvahs in actuality. Because a loss of time is a loss that is irretrievable. So, taka, assimilation. We got to fight assimilation. Right. So you want to wait around until people can read Hebrew and Yiddish messages? We don't have that time. The Rebbe says it in the most cordial and respectful possible way. But basically the Rebbe is saying, if you really care about assimilation, then you have to understand, that's exactly why our office sends out letters in English and sends out letters in French, and why we publish books in those languages, because we cannot wait for people to know those languages. We have to reach out to them and to save their neshamas. Okay. Milvadze, now, another point. And aside for the point that we don't have time to wait around right now. Hine poiba America, inyan hasafa in a kasha b'assimilatzia. Interesting point that Rebbe makes. Here in America, language is not so tied in with assimilation. It's a very interesting point that Rebbe is making. Very interesting. The Rebbe makes an observation that in America, language is not tied in with assimilation. I used the term before, linguistic nationalist. I don't know if Dr. Steinberg would refer to himself as such, but the term linguistic nationalist means somebody who sees the language, the spoken language of a people as an intrinsic, important part of their identity. Okay. There are definitely those today, in 2025 who see the language that they speak as a very important part of their Jewish identity. The Rebbe is saying that in America, it's not really true. You do not actually see a correlation between people speaking English and automatically becoming less religious. And conversely, what that I was about to say, people speaking, that Rebbe mentions Hebrew, and being more Jewish. Let's read this. To our great lament, we find here that there are youth who speak Lahak, who speak Hebrew. Especially those who speak in the Sephardic pronunciation. Okay. God willing, they will do tshuva, but right now they're not observant of Torah and mitzvahs. So, you're saying let's write in Hebrew to make sure that we don't fall prey to assimilation, but that I was saying here in America actually doesn't work that way. There are people who are into Hebrew. They're into it, and they're not Torah observant. So, I hear your argument, but we don't actually see that that's what's going on over here. Very interesting. I don't know if now is the time to reveal my conversation with Noam Chomsky. Probably not, but he should have a refuah shlema. I believe he's in need of one. But I spoke with him, not about politics. I spoke to him about Chassidus. Spoke to him about the Oisius, what it says in Igeres HaKodesh about the Oisius being from Kadmus HaSeichel, and whether that is connected to linguistic nativism. Yeah. Anyways, that's another discussion for another time. But he was telling me that when he was growing up in Philadelphia, in the 30s, that it was very fashionable for the young people to go to a department store and insist. They're talking about Americans, but they would insist we only speak Hebrew. We need an interpreter. They would insist that the department store would provide an interpreter, a Hebrew interpreter. Okay, I never heard about that before. I heard it from him. Anyways, but those were not observant people. In fact, they may even have been anti-religious. So that I was saying, the whole linguistic nationalism thing doesn't actually correlate with Torah mitzvahs. Now, interesting point that Rebbe makes. I'm not, correlation and causation are two different things. I'm not saying that their speaking Hebrew brings them to a lack of Torah observance. Ella, but rather, but rather they flip light to dark and dark to light. Shabad nizid adoshim shel leumius. That's nationalism. Moichim esavim shebeshmayim va'atera umitzvos. But rather, what I'm saying is the fact that they've sold out their observance of they've sold out their Father in heaven and their observance of His Torah for a pot of lentils. This is the famous story of Yaakov and Esav, right? So you're selling out your relationship with your father, right, the firstborn status, for what? For a pot of lentils. So they're selling out their relationship with their Father in heaven for what? For a pot of lentils. What's the pot of lentils here, metaphorically? Nationalism. So they traded their connection to their Father in heaven for this nationalistic identity. And that's why they're speaking Hebrew. So I'm not saying that Hebrew caused them to become non-observant, but I'm saying that their whole nationalism thing, where they replaced religious observance with a nationalistic identity, so then that brings with it the speaking Hebrew. I'm not going to elaborate on a painful subject. And how true are the words of our prophets? In this case, I think it's a pasuk from Yeshio, that from within you will come those who destroy you. right? And the Rebbe says something very, you can't read this sentence without, it's a punch in the gut. Ki oisen adeis v'ashkafes hakoizves sheyesh bahen nitzutz d'kedusha hein heinem avias yeser hezek. Those ideologies, the false ideologies that have a spark of holiness, are the ones that bring the most destruction. The Rebbe is speaking about this nationalistic identity. And it may even be a very polite way of pushing back against this guy and basically saying to him, although he himself was Torah observant, which is probably why, he might be more sympathetic to the Rebbe's line of reasoning. But the Rebbe is basically saying all this nationalism, because remember, this guy wanted to start a Jewish state, but not in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe is saying, look at it. What does it bring to? It has a spark of Kedusha in it because it's about Jewish identity, and maybe even they're using Hebrew, which originates in Lashon HaKodesh, which is holy. So it has a spark of Kedusha, but that doesn't make it better. It actually makes it more destructive because the spark of Kedusha, a little spark of holiness, actually gives the lie more power to do harm. So, like I said, the Rebbe is giving pushback in the most polite, cordial, respectful possible way to a guy that, frankly, like I said, I would be very put off that I found out this guy called Mazkiris to complain. All right, let's keep going. B'negea lekveda hine mashe shalchu lai min yonah deyema b'sfas hamedina. Now, set aside all the discussion about other people and about the culture and about current trends with youth and assimilation and nationalism. Let's talk about you, okay? Let's talk about you as an individual. This that you got sent a card in English, which I'm sorry was very triggering. Right? The Rebbe doesn't say that, but I'm inserting that. Sorry you got triggered by my English card. Okay. Hakavona bezeh ki im yimtzo bahem inyan bahem inyan hine betach yirtzo laviam lesumis leiv chug rochav yesu shebeneim gam kaela she'enam shem lahak a Yiddish. The intent was if you find it of value, then you could bring it to the attention of a wider audience, including people who don't speak Hebrew or Yiddish. Okay, it wasn't just for you. If you wanted to show this to somebody else, now I'm giving you that ability. B'chol muskar pnim. Sorry for laughing. At any rate, enclosed is some material in Hebrew and Yiddish. You want your Hebrew and Yiddish? Here you go. Here's your Hebrew and Yiddish. The Rebbe probably sent him sichos or something. I'm not sure exactly. Okay. Ubemehera b'yameinu yikuyim hoyud v'yasu kulam aguda achas lavidas Hashem echad. So may it be very speedily fulfilled the prophecy that they should all, meaning the Jewish people, should all become one bunch to serve Hashem, one Hashem, ayidekiyim Torah achas, by fulfilling this one Torah, meaning uniting under Torah observance, lukulanu, for all of us, v'yezeh achshav b'chol lashon shehu, Hashem shehu shemeya. It should happen now, meaning in any language that they understand. I'm not waiting until people learn languages. I want everyone to become Torah observant now in whatever language they currently understand. V'achar kach, then afterwards, b'safa achas l'kulanu, then we can come together under one language. Yeah, obviously, ultimately the goal is one language, but that's a later phase. It's a very, very interesting argument. And there, by the way, there are a lot of implications about this. I didn't want to get into it, but there are letters from the Rebbe about education. The Rebbe writes very strongly, do not waste the time of students educating them in a language that they do not speak fluently. There's so much Torah to learn. You should learn Torah in whatever language you can learn the fastest. Okay? That's a related point. I'm not getting off into that side point. But the main point here in this letter is we speak to people in the language they understand now. We're not going to wait for them to learn a language so we can start to be mekad of them to Avinu Shebashamayim. Such a powerful concept. And you see how much the Rebbe did. This is in the 50s, but then how much over the decades, as time went by, the Rebbe was Mefetz Mayonis, spreading out the well springs of Chassidus in all different languages is whatever language people speak. That's the language we're going to teach them Torah in. Gewaldig. Bechoved ubevracha, with respect and blessings, and that's the letter. Really special letter. Again, thank you to Zalman Bendit for digging that one up, and the backstory behind that. Very, very geschmack. Okay, have a great week.